All right, we are live. Welcome to Manning the Grill. I do like that royalty free charge. The first one I did, the second one I did actually did a YouTube song, and they blocked it out in 50 countries or something because I didn't have the royalties for it. So, how are you guys doing today?
I'm good. Great.
Awesome. Happy Wednesday. So welcome to Manning the Grill, sponsored by Dream Lane Real Estate, RE/MAX Preferred, my weekly lunchtime chat. This is episode 14, I think, right? Yeah, episode 14 of my 52-week chat about things. Today, the thing is vaccines. And it's not so much vaccines. I had to give it a name, right? We kind of did a little preparation for this, but I had to give it a name, and I decided I wanted to kind of talk about vaccines. And one of the things that got me thinking about this, and I'll share this. One of the things that got me thinking about this, I watched 60 Minutes. Yes, I'm becoming my father. And I watched 60 Minutes, and they had this article on there about pandemics, ending pandemics forever. And I thought it was kind of a perfect spot, timing-wise. You can't see the header to that, but the top part says military, something to do with the military and Pentagon are working on ending pandemics forever. I thought that was a great segue to kind of go into the virus. And I'll give you guys a story. I'm going to let you introduce yourselves. So I know I won't do it justice. And I'm honestly afraid to say Miss Mohns' name. I'll screw it up because I've been thinking about it so much, right? I told Chris this morning, I'm going to say Mariel. I know I'm going to say Mariel. So it's Mariel Mohns and Jordan Villanueva. And I just enjoy saying the name Jordan Villanueva. But I'll let you guys introduce yourselves in a second. But I'm going to start you out with this story. Make sure you tell people who you are and how you relate to the vaccine. But I'm going to start you out with the story. In today's real estate world, a lot of times we go to showings and we have to wait. They book up so fast because the interest is, we have so many buyers and so little inventory. So a lot of times you'll be sitting up by your car with your buyer, just gabbing, shooting the poo, right? A little extra normal. I'm really good at that. So I shine in that role, but you have to kind of keep the conversation going, waiting for the other couple to get out. And then there's also another couple behind you waiting to get in, right? So we're shooting the poo. This particular buyer, good friend of mine, I've known him for a while. Blue collar, I don't know what his income level is, but blue collar income level. His wife has comorbidities, and we were just kind of talking about it. And I'd mentioned I got the first shot. I got the Moderna. My wife scheduled it off for me, and I got the big one. I'm good. I'm like, yeah, my arm was sore. I put deodorant on. I was really tender under my armpit. I was so surprised. I was surprised at how deep the soreness went. And he went on kind of a rant for a few minutes about how he's not taking this. And I thought, but your wife has she's got some really, I don't know how to say it, some really integrated health issues, right? And I totally get it. But I'm like, why wouldn't you do that with her? That was his response. All the reasons why, right? We'll grow third nipple. They haven't tested it yet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you two, given that as a starting point, introduce yourselves, what you do, and how would you coach me to debate that with that buyer? Yeah, bam.
You want to start, Mariel, or me?
Starting off tough. Sure. Yeah. So I'm Mariel Mohns. I'm a science writer at the Morgridge Institute for Research. Before Morgridge, I was a science writer at Promega Corporation, which is where Jordan is, and how I know Jordan. Spoilers. And before that, I actually worked as a scientist in a immunology, virology lab, where we primarily focused on HIV and Zika virus. And I studied immune cells and how they responded to viral infections. So yeah, I mean, the vaccine and COVID, the COVID pandemic has really opened up this huge discussion for the general public, where in the past, I think most people would just take for face value whatever the scientist or whatever their doctor tells them and be okay with that. But now it's becoming much more of it hits closer to home, and people have access to information more than ever. And so everyone feels like they have the right and the freedom to do their own research, however you define research, and come up to their own conclusions as to how to handle a public health situation. I think conversations like that are really challenging because you empathize with the buyer and know that they have, their own opinions and their own fears. And, I'm sure the situation of having someone who has health risks can also be challenging to think about what they're going through. And so, really, I think, and this is something that I've been learning over the past year, is instead of trying to throw facts at people, which is what my inclination is as a scientist and as a communicator of facts, I want to just throw facts at people. But now more than ever, I'm learning that sometimes you need to just take a step back and listen and just hear their side of the story and understand why they believe certain things that they believe. And it's kind of a slow starting point in urging them to seek out more reputable sources or understand, oh, okay, you heard that. Where did you hear that from? Because I read this article, on NPR that says this. So that's very interesting that they're, competing opinions or something like that. Just as a way to ease into that conversation, but really just listening and understanding that, that other person is a human too, and they have their own situation, and trying to understand what their worldview is and why they feel the way they feel about science or about getting a vaccine is a start.
Spoken like a true salesperson. I like it. Science writers knows, right? How about you, Jordan? What do you think?
Yeah, so I guess to introduce myself, my name is Jordan Villanueva. I am a senior science writer at Promega. I've been there, coming up on 4 years, I think. Worked with Mariel for a little bit. One of the things, oh, that's neat. My phone just started ringing. I'll put that to the side. So yeah, like Mariel was saying, the problem of sharing information about the pandemic has been really fascinating to watch over the past year as a science writer. And I love the point Mariel was making about listening. One of the cool things about being a science writer is we communicate about scientific topics on so many different levels. In my day-to-day job, I could be writing about some recent research for the intended audience of people who are an expert in that exact field. So if we're talking about COVID-19, I could be writing about the virus for virologists or infectious disease specialists of any kind. But then you compare that to communicating about it with people in the general public, people who are perfectly intelligent people in general, but may not have a ton of background information about virology or immunology or epidemiology and some of these really complex fields that we're seeing come to the forefront right now. And I mean, this is going to sound really, this is going to sound like self-promotion, but like that's why science writing is so important, and that's why having people with a scientific background in newsrooms is a crucial thing. Because I know that mainstream media bashing is fun and fashionable, but there are some like general news sources that have amazing science writers in their newsroom that are sharing very credible information. They're digging into the research and evaluating its worth and passing it off in ways that are understandable to anyone, digestible to anyone. I think the vaccine is a really interesting topic for us to be covering because that's a lot more, like you bring up someone who's hesitant to get the vaccine, and it is like a very personal decision. It's also a very public decision because every individual's decision whether or not to get the vaccine affects so many other people. And so we have this
pandemic, right? How it affects other people. Wear your mask because you're not just protecting you. That's the whole theme of the whole pandemic, if you will.
Yeah, totally. So we have this issue of how do we communicate about the virus itself? How do we communicate about the public health measures? But then now what we're facing is this issue of how do we communicate to people about a very personal but also very public decision. And I know there's skepticism about how well researched is it, how well tested, things like that. And to me, the burden for that is on the scientific communicators, the medical health professionals, and the companies that are making the vaccines to make sure people are informed, that they understand, that the vaccine is frankly very well tested. I mean, these trials are enormous, and the FDA, I don't want to wade into regulatory territory here because that's a whole mess that I'm not not equipped to speak offhandedly about. But generally, we can trust the FDA to evaluate something before saying yes, millions of people can have this.
Right.
And if you want more information about that, it's about finding the sources that have looked into the trials, that have looked into the data that has been made public, and are explaining it in a way that's accessible.
Oh, it totally makes sense. So that's a perfect segue, right? Earlier in the year, I took part in a Regeneron trial. I personally did. I got COVID. I was in Florida helping my mom. I got stir crazy. I just wanted to see my mom. So I'm sorry, my mom. she's in her 70s, right? Who knows? And I just wanted to go see her. Anyway, coincidentally got COVID from my sister. Came back. I am blessed, and just knowing you two. So one of the things I'll say as well, both these people come from a connection that my wife has because she works at Promega, and I'm blessed to have a lot of her friends be my friends, and they're very intelligent people. And I can get a lot of facts. I think most people can get the facts as well, but I can get the facts just passing people in a parking lot, right? Because I have those kind of people as friends. Well, I wasn't afraid. It wasn't new to me, but another kind of situation when I went through the Regeneron trial, I kind of blindly, I won't say blindly, I read through stuff, but for the most part, I trusted the doctor, know him well, and trusted him who's running that trial. It was all guys from, what's the medical school in Minnesota? The oncology, it escapes me right now. Mayo Clinic.
Oh,
all
okay.
Mayo.
You're at Mayo.
It's in front of my head.
Like this big one down.
Like I'm not sure what you're talking about, your lane.
All the Regeneron trial were run from guys with a Mayo connection, and so it was safe. I thought it was safe. I did it, went through the whole thing, and I was in a barbershop, get my wig split, and the comment was, "Don't be a guinea pig. Make sure you're not a guinea pig for this stuff." And my response was, "Well, of course. If we're talking about how this is affecting African American communities, abnormally, why wouldn't? How do they know? how can they say that if they don't have the data, right?" So, where was I go? Oh yeah. So, how would you kind of respond to that when we talk about information and it is informational? People listen to the news, and I mean, I know people till this day who haven't left their house in a year. I'm like, how is that? And again, that's your choice, right? But it's different in other places. I definitely want the information. How would you kind of respond to that if that response had happened to you? You go first this time, Jordan.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that I always commend people who do voluntarily take part in studies like that, because that is absolutely crucial for understanding potential therapeutics, for understanding anything that could be helpful for fighting the virus. So I think it's incredible that you did participate in that. I think the question of informed consent is one that really fascinates me. I was really into bioethics in college, and I took every bioethics class that I could find at Northwestern. And it's, there are requirements that a study has to meet. They have to have the documentation. They have to provide you with certain information, certain documents before anything's ever injected into you or whatever, form something's being administered. But that doesn't always mean that you understand it, right? Because it could be written in, very dense language, things like that. And I'm not going to criticize anyone because I have no idea how things were done when you took part in this study. But sure. I think there's really an impetus on researchers to make sure, when each individual person comes in, that is a person's life that you're getting involved with. And I think you have a responsibility to build trust with them. You can share, there are certain things that they don't want to make public, I understand, but you can share relevant information. You can reassure people, this is what we know about it. This is what we're looking at. Here are things that might happen, but here are the benefits that you could have. And you bring up that certain communities are being affected more, and certainly we can look forever into the intersections of that with race and class and everything like that. But I can't understate how important it is to make sure that medical research institutions, hospital systems, medical or any sort of scientific research is building as much trust as possible, starting in the community, because you're right. We need data from everywhere. We need to know how this is going to work in every setting. It's absolutely crucial.
Yeah. Mario, is this a lot of the stuff that would happen at the Morgridge Institute? These kinds of researches and studies?
So the Morgridge Institute is, we are a private biomedical research institution, but we partner with the University of Wisconsin. And so all of the lab figures, the principal investigators, they all have dual appointments with the university. So they're professors as well, they're teaching and they're doing research. And so the majority of the research that we do is what's called basic research, which is essentially breaking down and understanding the fundamentals of biology, essentially. So it's not so much doing research that leads to clinical trials or development of vaccines, but it's all of the little building blocks that lead up to that. So, for example, very early on in the pandemic, scientists released the full genome sequence of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is what's responsible for COVID. And the scientists who did the sequencing, sure, the end goal is that we were able to develop a vaccine from understanding that genetic code, but the research they're doing, the basic research, is just essentially answering the question of what is this virus? Like, what is the code behind this virus, right? So it's just a very basic building block of information that the scientific community can then use to do things like develop vaccines or find treatments or find cures. And so I think that's something that's really important. Well, a couple of things that I wanted to mention, but just emphasizing that science and vaccine development, it's all a process, right? And the fact that we were able to go essentially a year from having no vaccine to multiple vaccines is, to use a very overused word now, but it's unprecedented, right? And the fact that we've been able to do that is because there have been decades of research that the scientific community has built up that has all accumulated into discovering a very quick answer to solve a problem. And something that I find really fascinating is that all of this was happening at the same time that the virus was continuing to ramp up. So it really was a race for a cure, right? Or not a cure, but a race for a treatment or a race for a solution. And there's many factors that go into it, but the fact that we were able to get emergency use authorization and remove barriers that are normally there for clinical trials or clinical testing doesn't mean that the vaccines are untested or they're not proven to be safe, or that we don't know anything about them. The truth is we do, and we know a lot about the science behind how these vaccines work. And it's just that we were able to remove the barriers that are normally there that prevent a vaccine from being developed so quickly. Usually it can take years, right? And so I think it's just really amazing that the scientific community was able to come together and to work together to solve that problem. And part of that is transparency and being open to share data and to share results and to share findings. So that's something that I think is really important, and just really something that doesn't get thought about a lot when it comes to health research. Like, most people just think about the treatments and the vaccines and the end results. But it's really just decades and decades of work that has made something like this possible, which I think is great.
Oh, amazing.
And Mariel, Oh, sorry, Lane.
Oh,
Something I want to chime in there because you mentioned, removing barriers, and one of the things that I know you and I have talked about a lot is how amazing the collaboration has been around the world during this pandemic, and
Yes.
and how we've seen less competition among scientists. Not worrying about being scooped, things like that. I've had the opportunity and the honor to interview some scientists who are right at the forefront of research on SARS-CoV-2, and every single one of them talks about daily or weekly calls with teams all around the world where they're all working on rapid testing methods, or they're all working on a certain piece of vaccine development, things like that. And that's truly amazing. And the other piece of that is the open and rapid sharing of results. We've seen so much more open science. We've seen people making their papers available before they've been through the entire journal publication process, which does present interesting new complications for reporting on those results. And we've seen different ways of handling that, some more effective than others. But at the end of the day, it's just a beautiful illustration of how quickly we can make amazing work happen when we're all working together, we're all pitching in, and working towards a common goal instead of being isolated in our own labs and trying to be the first to publish. So that's been a truly amazing thing to watch.
would you say that collaboration has been brought on by this pandemic, or was it not that way before and the pandemic kind of made everyone
I think
cooperate,
it's,
if you will?
yeah, I don't think that this pandemic was the turning point, but it certainly was the cumulative results. Yeah, I'm a writer. I just make up words.
We do.
Yeah, but it was a result of years of this developing. So back when I was still doing research, I mentioned I was doing Zika virus research, and our lab was actually one of the first labs to start doing Zika work, I think, because we had a collaborator in Brazil who kind of tipped off my boss. And my boss wanted to share all of that research in real time, because he saw that a couple years prior, the Ebola outbreak that happened in 2014, 2015, something like that. Fact check me. But the Ebola response was very, very slow. And there was a lot of criticism in the fact that this is a global problem, and scientists aren't sharing their research because they're holding on to that data and waiting to write it up and publish it in a reputable journal, which is all well and good. But when you're in a situation that there are many people that are being affected by a pandemic, then the greater good is to share that information so that other scientists can learn from it and that you can come up with a solution faster. And so that was Dave O'Connor's thinking with Zika virus and with sharing all of that information. And so that was in 2016. And so at the time, it was still kind of a relatively new thing for people to be sharing their data like that. But now it's much more common. And Jordan mentioned the open data sharing and preprint publications. There are sites like bioRxiv or medRxiv where scientists can upload their papers before they're peer reviewed. And even all of the major scientific journals now, they require that when you submit a paper, you also have to submit all of the data that you've collected during your experiments. Even if it's not cited in the paper, like, you still need to submit that data just for transparency and for openness. So it's something that has been slowly changing in the scientific community. But there are, after this pandemic is over, I'm sure the the scientific journals are going to be like, okay, well, now you have to pay money again to access all this information, and will slip back into the capitalist clutches. But
you bring up
There's your soundbite for this, Lane. The soundbite for this live stream is slip back into the capitalist clutches.
Right, slip back into the capitalist clutches. I love it. So one thing you brought up, you mentioned Zika, and SARS, and other things. I thought it was important to know that, or important for someone of authority, that'd be you guys. Maybe talk real quick to the point of, this is not the last pandemic we probably have. Correct or incorrect?
So,
and this is kind of all the information, everything Mariel just said about the research and collaborative, and it's coming, and it's all 50 years. Well, we keep studying it because
Yeah, I mean, that's such an interesting question, because I hate sounding like a doomsayer or super negative or anything, but there is a lot of research on how like urbanization, for example, is one of the big factors in increasing the likelihood that we are going to see a major infectious disease outbreak for something of zoonotic origin coming from animals. Anything that the more we see human spaces and natural spaces overlapping and intersecting, we're creating the environment for infectious disease to emerge. I wrote about this last year on Earth Day, which is tomorrow.
Happy Earth Day!
Yeah, happy Earth Day tomorrow. But yeah, last year on Earth Day, because we had all these great stories about how, because of all the lockdowns, we were seeing decreased air pollution. We were seeing, water clearing up in the Venice canals and things like that. And those were amazing stories. But human practices are still making this worse. We're still seeing people with a lower baseline respiratory health because of, the air pollution in cities and things like that. So to answer your original question, it does seem pretty likely, like we will see another major viral outbreak, or even outbreak of a disease originating from a different type of pathogen. But I think that underscores the importance of making sure that we're continuing our research. We're promoting scientific research spanning from the basic research that Mariel was talking about all the way to the translational and applied research, but also like encouraging kids to go into STEM fields, encouraging kids from all backgrounds, all areas, and making sure that we're preparing ourselves, because the more we can understand the world around us, the better prepared we're going to be, and the more rapidly we can get on top of things. Mariel mentioned that one of the first major developments was releasing the sequence of SARS-CoV-2. It wasn't that long ago that genetic sequencing in general was, extremely expensive to perform. It took us so long. I mean, the Human Genome Project was years and years and years of efforts. But now, Mariel also mentioned her former PI, Dave O'Connor. Dave is sequencing several hundred viral sequences a week right now. And that's been covered in, the University of Wisconsin's written several articles about it. Wisconsin State Journal's covered it. He's doing amazing work, and that wasn't possible, several decades ago. So that's the result of research that's being done into sequencing methods and making that faster and developing the technology. So the more we can prepare ourselves, the faster we can respond when things emerge in the future. And it is very likely, almost guaranteed, that they will emerge at some point.
Fair enough. Mariel, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah. Well, to answer your question, yes, most definitely there will be another pandemic, and
speed up for you, right?
And we just need to build upon the vast amount of knowledge that we have and move forward. But something to kind of tangent a little bit, it's still related, but based off of what Jordan was saying, and getting kids into STEM fields, and having young people be interested in science, and they're the ones that are going to save the world, right? And so we need to invest in our youth, and we need to invest in science programs and continue to support them as they go through college, as they go through grad school, as they come out of grad school and are looking for jobs. But I think one thing that just hit me is that, you know, there have been a lot of think pieces, and people have been talking about this past year and the pandemic and how is it going to affect our kids because they're at home and they're not at school, they're not socializing. But I think it's just really amazing that youth are growing up in this world where there's a crazy pandemic happening, there's severe devastation happening from climate change. That's a whole other science problem. There's
for another show.
Yeah, find another expert. There's tons of social injustices that are happening, that are still happening, that have been happening for years and years and years. And so it's this society right now that you can look at it as a lot of doom and gloom that are happening. And, you know, there have been a lot of people that have addressed that. But at the same time, like, it's also very hopeful and very inspiring that there's a lot of kids, like I think about like the teenagers that I see on TikTok that are super into social justice and super into, you know, fighting climate change and, you know, supporting the environment and wanting to help. And because of all these problems that we have, it's creating this younger generation of informed warriors that are going to literally save the world. So yeah, that's just something that, you know, based off of what Jordan was saying, and getting kids into STEM and supporting them, definitely I think is a huge responsibility that we need to take.
Yeah, totally. I hate TikTok. I have a 13-year-old daughter. But at the same time, there's some things that she says that I'm like, where'd you get that from? She's like, I learned it from TikTok. It was something about littering, and there was political stuff on there as well, which I thought was inappropriate, but I thought it was cool how they articulated their way through it using TikTok. Like anything else, there were the extremes, left and right, but it's their, like you said, it's their medium, right? Racism, the more kids, the 50s, we went to the civil rights stuff on our way back from Destin, right? You saw some of the, you look at the dates, there's this big timeline right there in Montgomery where it talks about from the time Dr. King died to the very first one. Anyway, the dates are all like in their 40s and 50s. I'm trying to tell my kids, like, this is literally not that far away, right? Ruby Bridges, when she got integrated to New Orleans School District, she's 66 years old right now. Like, she's not that old. But when her generation comes through, there's so many more mixed kids in the world, tolerance, all that's going to come through as the generations get older, right? As we get out of charge, we knew this. We said this. I remember saying this years ago. Like, once we get our parents' factories and irresponsibility out of the way, the world will go a little bit better place, right? So, great point. All right, so I'm gonna switch gears real quick. The last question. Thank you guys both for your time. I really appreciate it. Like I said, all you guys at Promega and Morgridge on a high pedestal. I love listening to you even speak about this, anything like that. But I'm gonna throw a curveball at you. The Johnson & Johnson pause. Whoa, the elephant in the room, right? So you've talked about how the virus is researched. You talked about how it's safe. You need people to be involved. It's been tested, although it came out fast. There's reasons it came out fast. You explain those. Since this is in the news a lot, and this pause, actually, I'm going to take a quick step back. Why are there three viruses? Why are three vaccines? Sorry, why are there three vaccines? Number one, because I always thought that when they came out with three, it always puts the automatic question in my mind: which is better? Is one better than the other? Is there a price difference, et cetera, et cetera? So, explain why there's multiple viruses in the marketplace. Number one. Number two, explain how we got to this pause and why people who've had it shouldn't be afraid. That was another whole conversation. A client who had it, she's like, I don't know what to do now. I'm like, well, you gotta wait now. That's what it is. But the numbers for those that have had complications compared to those who haven't, are just like taking aspirin, right? It's just about the same thing. But would you guys mind touching on that for a quick second as we close? We'll start with you, Mariel.
So I think you got it. I kind of touched base on this a little bit before. Oh, sorry, my dogs started barking. But transparency and, understanding the scientific process and, the barriers that we have with vaccine development and, how we've been able to quickly turn around vaccines. It doesn't mean that they're untested. But, with the Johnson & Johnson, like the fact that they took the pause is proof that the system of checks and balances and of the scientific process is working, right? They're collecting data. They found that there were these anomalies, and literally it's 1 in a million chance, so rare, very, very specific side effect, very specific type of blood clot. There are different types of blood clots that can happen. And, some people are trying to compare like, oh, well, you can get blood clots from birth control. And it's like, yes, you can, but it's not a direct comparison because it's actually a very different type of blood clot.
Oh.
And so it's a very specific thing, literally 1 in a million chance. So the risk is very low. But the fact that they decided to take a pause is to be transparent and to give medical professionals all of the information so that they can understand why this might be happening and be more informative for their patients and be able to come up with better options for their patients. So that transparency thing and really just understanding that this is science at work. Science isn't a one and done. This is the solution and it's final. It's trying to understand and continually asking questions. Why did this happen? How can we make it better? So I just wanted to tie that back to that point before about transparency.
It was kind of like Jordan's point earlier about having science-educated people in the media telling this story that doesn't get construed that everyone gets blood clots or whatnot. So, what would you say, Jordan?
Mariel covered a lot of what I was going to say. This is science. This is science working as it should, and I think the biggest problem is just figuring out how to communicate about that. Because there is a tendency to, when you hear the vaccines pause, there's a tendency to feel fear and, is it dangerous? Is there a serious problem with it? And then the problem becomes, how do we reassure people? How do we communicate that this is, we're just understanding the problem. We're taking some time to make sure that we're doing this right. And I think that's an issue with so many things related to vaccines, right? We've already talked about the decision to even get a vaccine. I think vaccine side effects are another thing that, not just the blood clots and the pause, but like so many people worried about, the symptoms that they feel the day after, Lane having a sore armpit. I also had a lot of bruising the next day. But I've talked to people who had, I'm not going to lie, like that bruise was no joke. I'm not going to pretend like it didn't hurt. But people discussing they were having flu-like symptoms for a day, things like that. That's the vaccine working. We have evolved in a very specific way. Our body reacts to things in very specific ways, and the cause or the or why things is happening doesn't always line up with what our initial instinct or initial assumption is. So it all comes back to the importance of scientific communication, the importance of science writers to be able to process the information and pass it along to people and meet them where they're at.
Sure.
Science is a beautiful thing. There's this idea that, I always see the catchphrase like science is true whether you believe in it or not. And I have such conflicted views on that because on the one hand, we're striving to find truths. We're striving to find things that we can say, this is how it is, but it's also an ongoing process. We're gonna find things in the next 10 years that are going to change what we believe right now. We're gonna make new huge discoveries, but we're also gonna make small tweaks to our to what we're currently believing. So it's all about trusting that process and making sure that we have the time and the space and the resources to find the best answers that we're capable of finding at that moment.
Yeah.
So that would be that. Those are my thoughts on Johnson and Johnson for what that's worth.
You said exactly what I wanted you to say, right? It's working.
It's working. Yeah.
It's working. Yeah. On the way out, one of my favorite things about being part of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society is that you get this amazing good feeling about it, because every quarter there's generally 2 to 3 FDA approvals that are new therapies or new medicines that help people, kids generally, fight cancer, beat cancer, whatever it is. And it's all based on the research, the money we raise for that type of cancer, right? Not every cancer is like that. We wish we could all afford it, right? But the rare ones, you just kind of have to do what you can with what you have, right? Because they don't have that many. So I fully believe in research, guys. I really appreciate your time. Like I said, we need another game night soon. So I genuinely just love talk.
Right? I should have mentioned earlier, I was actually having a virtual lunch with your wife while she booked your vaccine appointment.
Oh my God.
I watched her do that in real time. So yeah.
Yeah, she was all
love
about
you guys.
It's funny. So cool, guys. Thank you very much. Mariel Mohns, Jordan Villanueva, talk about the vaccine. Man in the Grill, thank you very much. You're gonna go out. If I can find my mouse. There we go. Like I said, the self-editing or self-production part